Well, in addition to being a writer who's really gaining in prominence through your published works as well as your essays, you are obviously an educator, and currently you're a professor of English and African American Studies at University of Mississippi. But you're also a distinguished visiting professor at the University of Iowa, teaching nonfiction. Can you tell me a little bit about what you share with your students who aspire to be writers? And
I mean, the main thing I share with them is the fact to me that you have to practice to get good at this, which means you're not good. You're not good. I mean, I keep trying to tell them that as much as possible. And I keep trying to tell them, whoever their favorite writer is, you can best believe that person was practicing. So I'm one of these teachers who really just believes in revision. I think you have to own like the oddity of your vision. You have to own the strangeness of who you are. But you ultimately have to revise and revise and revise and revise and revise. And even after publication, you have to be aware that it's still not as good as it can be. But there's joy in failure. Like I just find joy in trying to write something that I'm imagining that I can't get. I didn't have that joy early in my career. I thought, damn, if I can't get it right, it hurt. But now it feels good to constantly just circle and circle and circle and circle around the idea, knowing one day I might get as close as I can to it, but I'm never going to ultimately get it. Yeah, that's great. I think you got to embrace failure. You go nuts as a writer. Yeah.
David Foster Wallace said, "Good fiction's job is to comfort the disturbed and disturb the comfortable." So much of your work is truth-telling. How are you using fiction to explore deep questions?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, for me, fiction is the way I explore like what if questions. What if? Like, I can explore a lot of different things in an essay, but the question of what if is a fictional question that necessitates a fictional answer. So, when I wrote my first book, I was literally asking myself, like, what if this little black boy in central Mississippi could time travel from 64 to 85 to 68 and back? What would they see? And really, in that question, I'm asking if I could go back and take some things out of American history, American Southern history, what would I take out? So I had to do that fictively. Some questions necessitate the fictive exploration, and some questions necessitate the non-fictive exploration. But for me, it's just always about what if, and trying to be as honest to my imagination as possible. So I use some of those tools in nonfiction, but it's primarily a fictive way of exploring what's not there. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
And kind of the flip side of that is your nonfiction and your essays, and now the new book that you're actually talking to some students about here during this visit is Heavy, which is a memoir. And how do you kind of embrace that vulnerability as a writer to share some of those deep experiences and emotions?
That's a great question. My mother made me write. My mother was a teacher, and she made me write, from the time I was like 3 until I left the house. And so writing became a way of dealing with the world and dealing with parts of myself that I didn't want anybody else to see. And so now as a writer, if there are things about myself or my community or my state or my nation that I really want to ask, I can ask in my head or I can ask a friend, but I usually just use the page to ask the question. And often those questions are like draped in vulnerability and things like that. But I feel like if you're not unsettling yourself with the questions probably shouldn't be asked, So I definitely believe in, what David Foster Wallace said, what Baldwin talks about necessarily disturbing the peace. There's so many different kinds of peace that I want to disturb. But the hard part is when you're sharing memories that aren't just yours, So if I'm sharing a memory, for instance, if I'm writing about this situation tomorrow, it's a shared memory, right? Like, so I think the ethical dilemma comes in, like if I'm sharing memories that I think are half mine and half yours, what responsibility do I do? Do I have to show you what I write first to ask you what you might want to write? I think that's the harder part when you're dealing with nonfiction.
And you incorporate family into a lot of your writing.
Exactly. Yeah. So
are they comfortable with that sharing?
To varying degrees, they're comfortable. I try not to put anything out in the world if I haven't shared it with them first, if they're in it. But they're, and my grandmama, she might get veto power in my work, but she might be the only one.
I had to ask about your grandmother this morning because you have written about her a lot, and you do have this way of sharing your personal relationships, and in a way that I almost felt like I needed to know how she's doing. I think that's a powerful thing in writing when you're
thank you.
willing to share like
Right,
that.
right. And she couldn't do this. You know, she was born in the late 20s in Mississippi. You know, she's been through it, and she's brilliant, and she expresses herself brilliantly, and she's an artist in a number of rights. But she you know, she wanted to write, she just couldn't have the opportunity to do that. And so, like, sometimes when I'm writing, I'm telling her stories, but often I just want people to know I'm telling my version of what I see of her stories, which are not her stories. You know, she has her own stories to tell. I'm just trying to sort of show people what I see and what I hear primarily. But it's not the truth, you know what I'm saying? It's just like my point of view on what she's doing, who she is, how she feels and sees the world.
Yeah, I think it's powerful.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. So you've taught at a number of different institutions, and I know here at Oberlin, some of the students are challenging what is considered the canon, especially around like literature and music, history. I'd be interested in hearing some of your literary influences and some names that you would consider as those that we maybe should start including in kind of the canon for the future.
That's a tough question, right? Because anytime you include people in the canon, you make them part of the canon. And I think part of the explosion of the canon, I think, is a desire to explode this, you know, group of people that we necessarily must read, right? Like, so, you know, and everything I teach this woman, Margaret Walker Alexander, who's from Jackson, who was a big part of the Black Arts movement. I teach a lot of Baldwin. I teach a lot of Jesmyn Ward. I was thinking when I came back here today that there's this writer here named Rob Marriott who edited this Black publication called Nomo that used to come out here. And he, at the time, to me, was one of those writers who gave me permission. I think as writers, sometimes we just need permission to go into these places we've been told we can't go. And I just read what he did, I think my second week here, and I was like, oh my God, I didn't even know the essay could do that. And that wasn't, you know, I didn't get that from, you know, any canonical writer. I literally got that from a writer who had been here 2 or 3 years earlier, right? So he gave me permission. So yeah, I just like to look for writers who give me permission to go into places and spaces and language assemblages that I'm not comfortable. A lot of those writers tend to be from the South. But a lot of them aren't. You know, some of the greatest writers that I've read in the past 15 years have been students, you know, who haven't really been told they can't do something yet. And even if they are told, you know, the best students are bursting through that and be like, I'm gonna find a way. So I just learned a lot from and a lot of, you know, a number of those students have published books, but some of them haven't. You know, some of them are like math majors. You know, so. But if I was trying to expand the canon and be like, here's somebody I think everybody has to read, I'll definitely put Jesmyn Ward in there. Zandria Robinson is just like a completely underrated writer that I think the world needs to read. And I just think people need to do a lot of rereading. Like Baldwin, I think, necessitates rereading because his sentences are so long. He's dealing with kind of moral complexities that can't be understood in 1 or 2 readings. So as much as I think I would like to add names to the canon, I would just also encourage like different rereadings of people who are already in the canon.
So many American authors are kind of known for where they come from because it's incorporated into their writing. And you definitely embrace the fact that you're a Southern writer, yet you've kind of gone full circle. You've left Mississippi, you're back to Mississippi. And how do you find place as really being kind of central to who you are?
Yeah, place is probably the most important part of writing to me. You know, I come from a state where a lot of times if you can leave, you do leave. I stayed in Mississippi initially when I got out of high school because of that, right? I didn't want to leave. I wanted to stay there. I wanted to do work. I wanted my art to be born of that place. Got kicked out of college ultimately for writing some things I shouldn't have written, well, that the administration says I shouldn't have written. Came here, and as soon as I got here, one of the things I loved about Oberlin was that it was welcoming of, you know, my strange Black Southern Mississippi experience and the way I was trying to render it artistically. Like, not people weren't just like taking it all in, they were pushing me in particular ways. I was pushing them. Some of these people were writers, some people were dancers, some people were musicians. And I just like was surrounded by like swaths of writers and artists that I just didn't really know existed. And if I thought they existed, I thought I might meet them like when I was like 40 or something. You know what I'm saying? I didn't think I was gonna meet them when I was like 19 or 20. But even when I got here, I always knew I needed to go back home, precisely because I come from a place where people run away from. And so when I got the opportunity to come back home, I went back. And right now, you know, one of the places I work is home, is Mississippi, University of Mississippi in Oxford. But I work a number of other places too. So, but the thing about home is that when you go back after 20 years, it's not home. It's not the same home anymore, you know? And so I think when I first moved back, I was thinking, that's like us saying about these womb chairs. I was like, damn, this is not the home I remember. Like, did I change, or did the place change, or both, you know? But I love writing through that, you know? It's like a conundrum, I don't know. But yeah, Mississippi's always gonna be a big part of who I am, and I hope I don't run away from it again.
So we're talking about a lot of different colleges you've worked at. This is Oberlin. And a lot of people are kind of questioning the value of liberal arts education today.
Right.
But you have obviously embraced and done a lot with it. And I just kind of wonder, as you're working with students in various classes and capacities, kind of how you feel liberal arts is really giving them what they need in this world to be successful, both in life and also in work.
Yeah, I think if a liberal arts education is doing what I think it should do, it is constantly encouraging us to question everything about our subject position in the world, right? So, you know, this morning I was listening to an interview with Steve Bannon that he did yesterday, I guess, and so what my liberal arts education taught me to do was to obviously question, I think, the fallacies in Steve Bannon's interview, but to also question the intersections that Steve Bannon and I, Steve Bannon is somebody who is not like me at all, but I think there's some ways that I might be more like him than I want to admit. And I think my liberal arts education, in addition to some wonderful authors, has forced me to implicate myself and think about the role that I play in all of these structures. You know what I mean? Like, intersectional thinking is not just, race, class, gender, blah, blah, blah. It's thinking about like how parts of you intersect with like all parts of you in the world, right? And so when I'm talking to my students, I want them to be able to deconstruct the text. And I also want them to be able to, by the end of their senior years, deconstruct, their culpability in any sort of system that they want to explore. I think what we see outside of liberal arts institutions and also inside of liberal arts institutions is, we see a lot of different kinds of Americans not wanting to take responsibility for any of this mess, and not wanting to talk about the ways that the mess has like inflected them and also like infected us. So for me, liberal arts education, among other things, can teach us to be more lovingly responsible for the world that we inhabit. A lot of other things can do that, but liberal arts education, if it's doing its job, I think can do that most effectively.
Well, before we wrap up, you're having opportunities to meet with students and faculty and kind of relive a little bit of Oberlin. And any reflections or things you want to share to those who may not be here with us at this time?
Oh man, that's a big question. I was telling you at breakfast, I'm someone who really believes in critiquing all institutions. And so because of that, I sometimes don't talk about Oberlin because I don't know that I'm able to be effectively critical of this place because it was so formative for me. It literally was the best time of my life. I think I was most pushed, most supported. And it was weird. Like a lot of people I went to school with, like they married each other. I mean, like at Vassar, they definitely are not marrying each other, right? Like, so anyway, in a strange way, I'm just happy for like all of the different ways Oberlin is. And I want to be critical. I want in this interview to tell you something that I'm terrible about this place, but I don't really know anything terrible about it. You know what I'm saying? But I'm sure there have to be a lot of suspect things going on here. But for me, it was just, for me as a young writer, it's kind of why I'm here. And when I say it, I'm talking about the other students primarily,
Yeah.
and an administration who wasn't trying to like get in our, artistic business. Artistically, administration at the time was just like, y'all do your thing. And when I first got here, I told you, I was waiting for the administration to dip his fingers in what we were doing and like punish us or discipline us for the things we were writing, because we were pushing some boundaries, but they never did, and it allowed us to push each other to get better at our crafts, and again, cross genre, right? Like dancing, acting, jazz, fiction writing, nonfiction writing, comics. Just a lot of amazing artists and a lot of amazing Black artistry was going on, and I hope Oberlin is still a site for that, but I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not one of these alums who like. It's the first time I've been back in forever, so.
Well, it's been a real privilege talking to you today, and I really encourage everyone to read your work, to watch for your essays that are showing up many, many different places across the internet, and just to really watch you, because I think there's a lot of amazing work coming still.
Cool.
And just thank you so much for joining us today.
Absolutely, thank you.